Ace Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Not Alone podcast. I'm Sam Fredrickson.
And I'm Jason Moitoso.
And today we have quite the story. This is something that was actually suggested by Jason, and I was going to make it another Jason special. But then I started researching it, and I realized that I wanted to do it.
So yes, Sam stole my topic.
That's true. You have other topics you can do.
I do.
But if you recall back to the end of the last episode, you'll know that we're doing The Curse of Tutankhamun today. And we're doing it primarily in honor of Magic the Gathering, which is releasing a new
nerds.
Egyptian god-themed set tomorrow. So just a little tie-in to our real lives. We're actually trying to get this show out on Thursday instead of Friday so that we can just spend all Friday playing Magic. So we'll see how well that goes. The Curse of King Tut is something that has been a part of the psyche of the world since 1922. We're coming up in another 5 years. It'll be 100 years old. Well, 100 years old in the modern day. In reality, it's like 3,000 years old. And this, I'm going to be honest, before doing this research, I didn't believe in curses at all. I did not believe in curses. I have a hard time with believing in any sort of magical
Dude, they're
properties.
my favorite kind of aura.
Okay. Again, Magic tomorrow,
Okay,
podcast
my bad.
today.
I'm excited.
I know.
But anyway, King Tut.
King
Fun
Tut.
stuff.
And
Not really.
After,
It's the opposite of fun.
Terrifying
It's terrifying
stuff.
Yeah.
Having done the research, I mean,
Sam swooped it.
you're gonna hear. It's crazy, and it's kind of gotten to the thing where I was with the Jersey Devil. I'm just a little bit afraid again.
Dude, just don't touch his death mask, and you'll be fine. Or the tomb.
I really wish it was that.
Or
simple.
the sarcophagus, or any of the artifacts.
Just don't go to Egypt. That's
Dude, I'm
really...
so going to Egypt, bro.
It would be
oh
so
my
great.
gosh, it'd be amazing.
Let's just go ahead and dive right in. This is going
I don't
to
want to be the evidence to this one, though.
No, that's
this is
true.
bad.
That's true. This is going to be, I'm anticipating, and if I'm wrong, I'll edit this out, a fairly longer episode, just because there is a lot going into it. So probably like an hour and a half as opposed to an hour and 15. But in reality, we never stick to the time limit anyway, which is supposed to be 1 hour. And I can never get these to be less than an hour. So
We are failures.
We are failures.
Time's irrelevant, though, right?
That's true. Anyway, so we're just going to dive right in. So, and we already messed up. So, King Tutankhamun.
Wait, you messed up on King?
I was going to say Tutankhamun, I guess?
Ting Tutankhamun.
Ting Tutankhamun. Okay, well now we're going on the direction we don't want to go in.
King
Tutankhamun
Hey, there you go.
was actually born Tutankhaten. His regal name means the living image of Amun, while his birth name means the living image of Aten.
So what's the difference in that?
Well, we're going to get into it a little later on. Not really. We kind of will. Basically, Amun was before and after King Tut was the chief deity in the Egyptian pantheon, whereas Aten is it's basically the sun, the solar disk.
Mm-hmm.
And his father, which we'll kind of briefly touch on here, had kind of a thing for Aten. So he named him Tutankhaten.
Yeah, he was a sun bro.
Yep. But as his life went on, and especially once he became king and all of that, in an effort to satisfy the general public who still worshipped Amun as the true king of the gods, he changed his name back to Tutankhamun. Or not back to, but he changed his name to Tutankhamun.
I'm going to stay with Tut, I think.
Yeah, I think we'll probably do some abbreviation. And just the same thing with every other episode.
I can't pronounce a thing.
He can't pronounce a thing. I can try by just clearing my mind and just going for it. And sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm not. But, if we say it wrong...
We're trying.
We're trying, but be as offended as you want and write us as many angry letters as you want. That's fine. We deserve it. Anyway, King Tut was born in 1341 BC and he died in 1323 BC. His father was the pharaoh Amenhotep IV, who, like we just touched on, would later become known as Akhenaten. Now, we're not going to talk too much about Akhenaten right now, but he is an enigma in and of himself. He does not appear on the lists of the kings. He doesn't really have too many monuments and stuff. And anywhere where it would say Akhenaten, instead it says the criminal or the enemy or the traitor. And that kind of just sets the tone for why we didn't know about King Tut before this.
And no, I want to dive in right now. So,
okay.
The reason why, oh gosh, here we go. Akhenaten.
Are you having a stroke?
I don't know, but I feel like we should take that clip and turn it into like a ringtone.
Akhenaten. We're just gonna remix it.
So, Tut's father.
We'll call him Aki. No, we're not gonna call him Aki.
Okay,
that's disrespectful.
Yeah. Tut's father. Essentially, he tried to move Egypt from a polytheistic to a monotheistic religion, which is completely
different
and utterly, in a lot of cases, incredibly wrong to most Egyptians.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a huge pantheon and were very, very tied to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's why him and all his descendants were pretty much stricken from essentially everything. And essentially why he became an infamous king. Yeah.
So, and that
helps lead with Tut not really being disturbed.
Yes.
And really not found and talked about at all.
In theory.
I mean, okay, give me a better one. You think it's the curse?
Curses, yes.
There was not a curse actually inscribed on the tomb.
There was not a curse, but there was something, and we'll get into that.
Okay. All right. Why don't you start us off then, Sam?
Okay. Well, yeah, so that is a great just little summary of what happened.
The more you know.
The more you know.
Because you could definitely know more.
That's true. Which, if you want to know more, stick around to the end of the show. We've got a big announcement. But in any case, that's why we didn't know who King Tut was. And that's something that a lot of people nowadays don't really know and understand. They think, oh, he must have been famous forever. He wasn't. He was completely and totally unknown.
I mean, he died at like 18, 19.
18 or 19, yeah. He was born in 1341. He was the son of Akhenaten and an unidentified woman.
His sister.
We don't know that.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, well, we do know. This woman used to be known, well, she is still known to Egyptian historians as the younger woman. She has been through genetically testing. She's been proven to be Akhenaten's sister, which probably contributed to the health problems of the young pharaoh. He ascended to the throne in 1333 BC, and he was only 9 or 10 years old. So he most likely did not really rule. He would have had advisors who were very powerful, one of whom was a man named A, who was his grand vizier, and also maybe his uncle. The thing about it, because of the obscurity on Akhenaten and Tutankhamun's line, as well as just the fact that it happened 3,000 years ago.
A lot of the history has been attempted to be erased. Yeah. So for us to dig that back up is a little bit tougher.
Whatever's left is just convoluted. Or maybe A was his...
It's spelled A-Y.
A-Y.
For reference, I guess. So when Sam says I, he doesn't mean himself.
Correct. Unless I'm saying I.
Oh, man. This is going to be a weird distinction.
I'll point to myself if I mean me.
You realize we're not on camera.
It's not a visual medium. I was his grand vizier, possibly his uncle, and he most likely ran the government. Like we mentioned, Akhenaten had tried to make everything monotheistic, tried to pull Egypt away from their long history. Even in 1300 BC, they still had a few thousand years behind them of polytheism and the worshiping of the gods. This didn't sit well with people. This is how they had believed. This is how they had believed for 2,000 years to that point, which just goes to show what huge thing it was that happened with Akhenaten. But Tutankhamun's reign was mainly just damage control. Akhenaten had caused economic and infrastructural issues related to his rejection of the gods.
Yeah, I mean, temples became disrepaired, essentially overgrown, and Tut essentially tried to make up for that
Yeah.
in a lot of his rule, his 9-year rule.
In any case, this is how he's mainly remembered. He poured a lot of money, a lot of time and manpower into the restoration of the temples and idols of the old gods, now gods again. He also did some diplomatic repair because Akhenaten really didn't give one about diplomacy while he was alive. He just kind of let it fall by the wayside. And so...
Yeah, he had one goal in mind. he was very, very narrow-minded.
Vision, yeah,
exactly. Just, this is what I want, this is what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. On a stela, which is a type of stone slab used for historical record keeping or even as tombstones sometimes, we find an inscription dedicated to Tutankhamun's restoration of the Egyptian deities, and it states, "The temples of the gods and goddesses were in ruins. Their shrines were deserted and overgrown. Their sanctuaries were as non-existent, and their courts were used as roads. The gods turned their back upon this land. If anyone made a prayer to a god for advice, he would not respond." And that's the spiritual crisis that Egypt was in. On the door of Tutankhamun's tomb, it stated that he spent his life fashioning the images of the gods. He reversed many of his father's royal decrees. One of the big ones is that Akhenaten had actually built a little city, a big city, called Akhenaten, and had moved the seat of power from Thebes to Akhenaten, and then Tutankhamun moved it back to Thebes.
Essentially, his pharaohship was reversing everything his dad had done.
Cleaning up, which may not seem like the most dignified way to spend your life, cleaning up after your father.
Right, but it definitely spoke to the people.
It meant so much. It meant so much. He would have, most likely, if he hadn't been stricken from the king's list he most likely would have been remembered very well as
favorably,
as a good pharaoh, as a good man. He did die when he was 19. People really speculated this on a long time. Some people thought that A murdered him. Other people thought that it was...
Yeah, well, I mean, for what we have right now with his body, and I'm sure we'll dive in later, but with whoever actually excavated the dig and performed somewhat of an autopsy, did not do the best of jobs. And so, I mean, there was quite a bit of destruction to the mummy. But,
well,
I mean...
1922.
Right.
You can't really blame him too much.
We weren't great at it. It was still antiquities. It wasn't, actual science. It was more of, hey, let's go out, dig some stuff up, and take stuff home.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's skull damage. There's a lot of damage as well that happens to the body. There's speculation that he was ran over in a chariot accident.
Yeah.
Or in war. I think probably what we've realized most recently is the most ideal, which is essentially he was very sick.
Just sick. He from the start he was born sick. He had a cleft palate, he had scoliosis, he had a deformed club foot.
Yeah, which kind of makes it impossible for him to ride a chariot, let alone stand up without aid.
Right. He most likely used a cane all of his life, and there were a lot of canes
for days.
Canes for days.
Like almost for all eternity.
Yeah.
I have no idea why there are so many.
Well,
they get boring after a while, right?
You gotta look spry. You gotta look good.
That's what I'm saying. Monocle and top hat. We will get looking great.
All right, and we're forward now. I don't want to invoke this curse. I will note that I am sick right now. I was totally and completely healthy before I started researching this. And it's probably just psychosomatic. But, I had to call out of work on Tuesday because my body was doing unspeakable things. I don't want to invoke this curse. That's what I'm trying to say here. Nowadays, we do have more science. We have the DNA testing. That's actually how we know that Akhenaten and Tutankhamun are related. And the DNA testing also just revealed multiple strains of malaria in his body, which means that he had malaria multiple times.
Yeah.
And a fracture to his left thigh bone as well. At this point in time, it's generally understood that he was just really sick. He may have had malaria and broken his leg at the same time, and his body essentially was just like, I'm done.
Keep going.
Yeah, I'm out of here. But after his death, his maybe uncle and previous vizier I took the throne because King Tut's royal line ended with him. he was married, and he had 2 daughters, but they were both stillborn.
Yeah.
So he had no one else to carry on the throne. If he did, it's possible I would have still usurped it, but if he did, his line would have continued. He never would have been struck from memory or anything like that.
Are we gonna dig into the curse now?
We are gonna dig into the curse.
See what I did
died
there?
He died in 1323, and then we didn't have any idea that he existed until 1922. His name had been discovered actually 15 years earlier than his tomb was by a man named Theodore M. Davis, who had found the name on artifacts in a different site. He figured that the site was the complete tomb of King Tut and just closed all further discovery into that area. He said, we're done here. Davis retired in 1914, and he was just frustrated because he had not uncovered an intact royal tomb. But if he had kept going, he was only 2 meters away from King Tutankhamun's tomb at that time.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
just the worst.
That's awful luck.
The worst.
On the flip side, the man that actually did discover his tomb had incredibly good luck.
Oh, yeah. Well, for a time.
Yes. Luck in discovering it. How about that? Which, at this point in time, a lot of antiquities and
Antiquiters.
And
I don't know if that's a word.
Anyway.
Archaeologists.
Most archaeologists of the period believe that the Valley of the Kings was, for the most part, dug up. There is nothing really left to discover.
Yeah.
Besides for one man.
Well, Theodore M. Davis, he finally quit in 1914 just out of spite, basically. And he did. He wrote...
And Tut essentially just became a very obscure name that most other archaeologists of the time...
I don't know why you're doing air quotes. These people are archaeologists.
They're completely different from the archaeologists that we have of today.
Well, because we have different technology today. They're doing their best.
And we have more respect for it.
That's true.
I mean, let's be honest. If you were a rich British person, you would essentially back or go on these digs.
Yeah.
And go excavate and essentially kind of find things and want to take it home.
That's
from
true.
Egypt.
Yeah. Not the best idea.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why there's a line between, I believe, antiquities and like full-blown archaeology is a line of respect.
Yeah,
is what I think what it comes down to, not only for those that lived in that time period, but also for the research and the science.
All right, I can dig it.
That's where I personally.
That's
feel
why
like
you're
the line
doing
is
air quotes.
Yeah,
air quotes.
Yeah, they're two different evolutions.
Okay,
you know.
I can dig it. But Theodore M. Davis, after retiring, or maybe slightly before, had written a book. And in it, he actually said the Valley of the Kings is exhausted. So when he retired, and George Herbert, the person who took up his commission, you have to have a commission to dig in the Valley of the Kings, where all these tombs are. He basically said, "Hey, can I have this?" And Davis was like, "Sure, man." You're not going to find anything, but go play in the sand. You're fine. But, like we said, 2 meters. 2 meters away. But in any case, that takes us to George Herbert. He was the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, and he took up Davis's place excavating the Valley of the Kings. He had just fallen in love with Egypt after having relocated there because he had poor health. But they had been at work for 8 years. He had contracted with an archaeologist named Howard Carter, and the two had been at work for 8 years by the time they just stumbled on the tomb.
Yeah, which, to also give some backstory about Carter is, he did know about the possibility of King Tut's tomb, which is why he did excavate for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, he was the only person that methodically mapped out the Valley of the Kings.
He was the most scientific.
Yeah, he was the closest to an archaeologist.
Yeah. But even then, they finally found a flight of stairs that was just descending into the earth. This was in November 1922, and at the bottom of it there was a great door.
Yeah, the doorway, essentially into the main chambers.
Mm-hmm. And on this door they found the cartouche, which the cartouche is it's an oval with a line at the end of it, and inside of it is the royal name.
Yeah.
Hieroglyphics.
It's a name tag.
Yeah, basically. As soon as he sees this, he gets super jacked. He tells everyone, fill the hole back in.
Yeah, because this was also the last season that Carnarvon gave him.
Yeah, this was it.
This was the last season that he was given. It was like pretty early into the season as well. It was like 3 or 4 weeks into it. And yes, his efforts finally paid off.
Yeah, after 8 years. I mean, 8 years
coming up empty-handed.
That's how we're gonna be on this podcast. Maybe 8 years from now, we'll actually we'll
dig something up from here.
There we go. We'll make a discovery. But
whose tomb is it? Is it ours?
It is ours. He discovers the flight of stairs. They refill the area, wait for 2.5 weeks for Carnarvon and his daughter Evelyn to arrive, and then they begin the proper excavation.
Sort of. I mean, they dug around a little bit more. They found a side entrance as well, and that's kind of where they took a peek at, and they were actually really disheartened because that secondary entrance looked like it had signs of grave robbing. Luckily to them, though, it was essentially that one chamber that was robbed. The rest of it was pristine.
Was perfect. When Carnarvon gets there, they drill a hole through the door. He holds up a candle, and he looks inside, and someone says, I just love this. Someone says, do you see anything? And he replies, yes, wonderful things. Because what he was seeing was a lot of gold and a lot of intact artifacts.
Oh, yeah.
It was pretty much undisturbed. They go in, and they just find treasure. And just in the antechamber, it takes them 3 months to catalog everything in that one room.
Yeah, there's like some 5,000 artifacts, wasn't there?
Yeah. Thousands of things. And then, in February of 1923, they actually opened the inner burial chamber. They walked in. They found 3 solid gold coffins, all nested within each other. And upon opening the last one, they find the body of King Tutankhamun. And they are just so
pretty
jazzed.
Jacked. Yeah.
So jazzed. Strange things started happening. Like I said, the curse was there the minute they opened the tomb. And that's what we're going to talk about now, is the actual curse itself.
All right, the bacteria.
Okay. No, because listen to this. First thing, right out the gate.
All right, hit me.
Okay.
Right out the gate.
So the day that the tomb was initially opened, Carter had sent a messenger to his home just to perform some sort of errand. As the messenger approached the home, he said he had heard a faint, almost human-like cry. And upon entering, he was flabbergasted to see in the cage. Carter had this pet canary that he just adored. He just loved it.
Yeah, it was essentially like the symbol of hope.
Yeah. And in the cage of this symbol of hope was a king cobra.
Who ate the birdie.
Who ate the bird. The same exact time. So right from the start, sure, it's a coincidence.
Freaky things happen.
Freaky things happen.
I'm not gonna shoot that down.
Good.
Well, but that's what we do here. We talk about very weird things. Some of it's explainable, other things not so much.
You just gotta say that canary had been there for years. Like, why was it right here, right now, right when the tomb was opened or on that day?
Because it makes for the perfect story.
It does make for the perfect story. It does. I mean, it should be noted that as publicity goes, both Carnarvon and Carter took themselves and the dig seriously in their own way, and what they did not want happening was people thinking it was a curse.
Right, because I mean, if they wouldn't go to the extent as like, again, cataloging everything possible if they're, just wanting to inspire a curse.
Right. They were serious about it.
Which they were the actual recipients of, so
Fair.
Makes some sense, right?
Fair. Now, in ancient Egypt, the cobra was always seen as a protector of the pharaoh. I can't remember the name for it, but they had these specific crowns that they wore, and the cobra was at the top and forefront of it.
By it.
Mm-hmm. And it was believed that the cobra protected the pharaoh by spitting fire at his enemies. So it was really like a portent of doom. However, the weird thing about it, yes, the idea of a curse and all of that started and stuff as soon as they opened it, but this specific account, it wasn't later added after the fact of everything that occurred, because it was actually reported December 22nd of 1922, which is before the curse gets into full swing.
Okay. I'm following.
And like Jason had said, the idea of curses on tombs weren't a new one. It should be noted that there are descendants recently interviewed, like I think the 90s, of descendants of 5 different workers, local workers on the tomb, because of course you had Carter and his British
but they also
archaeologists,
had
but
a dig team.
yeah. And that was mainly
They
local
employed
Egyptian
local
people.
labor, yeah.
These 5 people, all from different families, all representing a different original worker, they claim that their forefathers were given a broken stone plinth by Carnarvon, on which there was clearly some sort of writing, but Carnarvon had already taken a hammer to it, to the point where you couldn't read the inscription. They were ordered to bury all the pieces separately from the others in the desert in the dead of night. And they were told that it was a dangerous thing, something that carried a terrible disease, and for medical safety it must be disposed of. But they said, well, why, like, if that's the case, why do we have to do it at night? And you just have to do it at night. Like, you just have to. If you do it in the day, people are going to freak out. They're going to think it's a curse. It's not a curse. It's just a medical hazard. All right. But later on, Carnarvon and Carter were both heard discussing the stone while they thought they were alone, and did confirm that the inscription was a curse. So,
this is new information to me.
Oh, see? That's what you get. That's what you get. Boom. Curses. They're real. You know, I feel like, again, it's such a conflated thing because it's such a famous case and all of this and that. But if you have 5 different individual people witnessing or going on record that this did happen, you have to give that at least some kind of merit.
So we've talked about this impending curse. Let's talk about its victims.
Yeah, so the first victim was actually Lord Carnarvon. As soon as they had opened the tomb, Carnarvon started seeing black jackals in the desert, black dogs in the desert. And the jackal is associated with Anubis, who is the god
of death, essentially. The
Well,
underworld?
No, Osiris is the god of the underworld. He was the god of death in a way. He was a psychopomp. So he escorted dead souls into the afterlife, and he was the protector of tombs. That was really his role. And ever since they opened the tomb, he had been seeing these dogs, and they were freaking him out. And within weeks of opening the tomb, Carnarvon mysteriously fell ill. The official story was that he suffered some complication due to a mosquito bite. He was shaving, and then
he cut it open. And then he just kept festering. It wasn't coagulating. It wasn't healing.
Gross.
And then he just got a fever.
Yeah.
And eventually just died. Yeah.
And again, kind of just like Tutankhamun, Carnarvon was not a healthy man. Like, he was a chronically ill man. And this is something that probably most people's body could fight off.
Right.
But his couldn't.
He probably has a weakened immune system, and he suffered.
Yeah. Now, the minute he died...
This is the weird part.
This is the weird part. This is the beyond a reasonable doubt part.
Yeah, this is...
The minute he died, as confirmed by people who were there, Cairo experienced a citywide blackout. Thousands of miles away. Thousands of miles away.
There it is.
Thousands of miles away on his estate back home in Britain, his 3-legged dog. Like, think about that. That's already sad.
It's adorably sad, though.
Tripod. His 3-legged dog, Sandy, let out a howl and dropped dead for no reason whatsoever. Healthy dog, other than
that's
the leg
right
thing.
there. That's the thing. I mean, power outages in the 20s. I mean, that could happen. I mean, but the dog dying is creepy.
It is
just
weird.
Creepy.
It's very strange. As soon as word of this got to the press, that's when the real media frenzy about the curse started.
Yeah.
And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who he authored and created one of the most logical, reasonable characters of all time. He was such a huge supporter of the supernatural, and especially like Victorian era.
What did he create?
Sherlock Holmes.
Okay, that's what I was assuming. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, he was so into like spiritualism and stuff like that. He actually took to the press and claimed that Carnarvon had been a fool to neglect the curse. He claimed that elementals had been summoned by the priests of Tutankhamen to guard his body for all eternity. Now, shortly after Carnarvon's death, the exact wording of the curse was leaked to the press by one of the workers, supposedly. It read, "They who enter the sacred tomb shall swift be visited by wings of death," and was supposedly inscribed in hieroglyphics on the door to one of the inner chambers of the tomb adjacent to the inscription of
For lack of a better word.
just unidentifiable winged monster.
Which, I mean, a mosquito is.
Right,
It's
exactly.
a winged monster.
It is. It is death on wings.
I think we can all agree with that.
Like, even nowadays, mosquitoes still suck, but they're also dangerous in certain areas.
They do suck.
Yeah. Hey. Now, again, this is something added after the death of Carnarvon. So it could be all baloney. That's fine. That's okay. Especially the fact that it references Wings of Death and the fact that Carnarvon died of a mosquito bite. I don't know if people have gone back into the tomb and searched for this inscription and found it or not. I wasn't able to find any reference to that in my research, just the inscription itself. Did you find anything about that?
About what?
About this so-called inscription of the curse?
Yes. Wings of Death.
Right. Was it actually there?
I've heard things.
Yes or no, Jason?
Affirmative.
Okay, good. So yeah, it was there. It was there. So that's a good sign. Well, it's a bad sign. Now Carnarvon was dead. Carter was in a bind. His backer had died, and he was perched on the most, like, it made him famous. Even if he hadn't done anything else, it still made him famous. But the most significant archaeological find probably in the entire 20th century. And he was running
I would agree with that, yeah.
Yeah. He was running out of cash. So he started courting other wealthy patrons just weeks within Carnarvon's death, one of whom was a wealthy financier named George J. Gould. Within weeks of... Oh, sorry. We already said that. George J. Gould. Days later, after being given a private tour, Gould came down with a fever out of nowhere and died.
Gone. Lights out.
Now, in his last moments, Gould seemed to have lost his mind to the fever, supposedly.
Mm-hmm. What did he say, Sam?
He started raving and ranting. He said he could see and hear the spirits of the pharaohs surrounding him in his deathbed, and he saw the jackal-headed god Anubis draw his breath out of him. Just draw it out of him.
That is a super epic hallucination.
It is extremely intense.
Yeah.
And again, Anubis was the protector of all tombs, but especially of King Tutankhamun's tomb. There's actually these things that are in the majority of Pharaoh's tombs called magic bricks, and they are unfired bricks of clay that point to the 4 cardinal directions. Tutankhamun's tomb had 4 different magic bricks, but it in the normal places, but then it also had one more, and it was on this brick that really, I mean, I'll just read. I can't remember the entire inscription, but it basically ends, I'm quoting here, "I will kill all those who cross this threshold into the sacred precincts of the royal king who lives forever." And that was supposedly found in front of the statue of Anubis that was guarding King Tut's tomb.
It's pretty sweet.
It's pretty dope.
Pretty sweet.
So Anubis had always been a protector, and it's just weird. Yeah, you got your psychological issues. You got the fact that there's a curse associated with it. This guy is dying. He knows about the curse. His mind's going to fill in the gaps one way or the other. But that is just bizarre to have that report of Anubis grabbing the breath out of him. Another visitor to the tomb was... Huh?
Uh-oh.
Was the British MP.
It's the only reason why you're bringing him up. It's probably because he died.
Yeah. Pretty much anyone from here on out, something bad happens to them. There was a British MP named Aubrey Herbert, and he was actually Lord Carnarvon's half-brother. He entered the tomb, and upon getting inside, he just looked around and said very loudly, "Something dreadful is going to happen to our family." Just right out the gate.
Because, his half-brother dying isn't
right.
dreadful yet.
Right. Well, that's what's so weird is something dreadful is going to happen. Not has happened, which would be the totally normal thing to say because your half-brother's dead.
Right.
But something dreadful is going to happen to our family. And by the end of the year, he had gone blind. And in an effort, 1920s science style, they decided, okay, we're going to remove all of your teeth to restore your sight. So
Is that was a thing?
that was
that was believed?
That was a thing. Apparently, he goes blind. So
Take your teeth,
intense
you guys.
emotional pain from that. They rip out every tooth in his head. So intense physical pain because of that. And then he dies of blood poisoning due to that operation.
That sucks.
That is the kind of suffering
That's a bummer.
that I would associate with an ancient curse. Not just, oh, he's dead. Like, you lose your vision, you have to go through hell, and then you still die.
Yeah, that's rough.
It's terrible. The following year, we're into 1924 now. It rang in the new year with another death of a man who x-rayed King Tut's body. His name was Sir Archibald Douglas Reed. He again, just like a lot of these stories, totally happy, healthy, normal guy, x-rays the body, and he's dead. Like, within weeks, he dies. No one, to this day, we still don't know why he died.
He knew what X-rays did to the body.
Yeah, he didn't seem to have died of radiation or anything like that. Following him, and I don't know exactly what year. I don't believe it was the same year. I think it might have been 1926. The next person to succumb to the curse was a man named Hugh Evelyn White, and he was a very promising young archaeologist and scholar. He had translated many ancient Greek works and had focused his research on the development of the early Christian Egyptian church. He had...
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, it would be. But he helped to excavate the tomb and was actually one of the first people after Carter who entered it. And this is where it gets, like, even more tragic. His home was, like many people, like Jason touched on earlier, these people liked souvenirs, and they liked trophies, and they liked knickknacks and things. So his home was full of these artifacts that had been taken specifically from the tomb. He was found one day hanging in his home with a note that was written in his own blood, and it stated, "I have succumbed to a curse which forces me to disappear." As far as we know, he was not mentally troubled. He wasn't depressed or anything like that before the opening of the tomb. He was a happy, healthy, and really successful guy, and even still successful for those
I'm
years
sure it's
after.
Tut's curse. It could be a different curse.
It could be a different curse. That's true. The way that people see this one, and it's just heartbreaking for this guy who's just...
tragedy.
Yeah, he's just so successful. He's doing amazing things, finding amazing work, and just takes his own life. The rationale behind it, not to try to romanticize suicide or anything like that, the rationale is that he was taking control back. He believed so firmly and deeply in the curse. He knew that the curse was going to get him eventually, if not very soon.
So he got himself first.
He got himself first, which is just...
Unfortunate.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's tragic. And he did. He was surrounded by these objects all the time. So if it was a purely psychological thing, if there is no curse, and it's just pure, power of thought, I mean, being surrounded, again, the media coverage, the stories of people dying, and then suddenly you look around your house and you have dozens of artifacts taken from this supposedly ancient, cursed place.
Right.
I mean, it's going to get to you one way or the other.
Which is also, great to point out that it got a lot of other people thinking too that had Egyptian artifacts at home. And a lot of museums actually saw a flood of essentially people just trying to get rid of the stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't want the curse. I don't want any kind of curse.
I'll give
Just
this
take
curse
it.
to
Take
the
it.
Louvre.
I don't need it. And that also happens later on with Carnarvon's family as well. His descendants, they do stumble upon older artifacts that were hidden away in essentially a secret room in a safe by the butler.
Lord.
Yeah. So they're just like, no.
Nope.
Let's get rid of this stuff. Don't need that bad mojo.
Yeah. Oh, man.
And yeah, because of the curse, we see a lot of other essentially wealthy folks returning or essentially giving back their artifacts to either museums or to Egypt itself.
Yeah.
Which is hilariously great. I'm a big supporter
I mean, it's
of that.
fantastic. Yeah, we shouldn't, in my historian bent that I have of myself, we shouldn't be taking these artifacts in the first place. They're not ours.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
still,
I mean,
it's still grave robbing. Like, it is still
110%.
It's different if you're going to excavate it, and then, donate the find to the Egyptian natural history.
Well, typically what happens now is most of the time when an archaeologist or anyone goes on a dig, it's backed by some museum in the first place.
And there's something to be said for not removing objects from people's graves anyway. If you have to do it, which you don't, but if you tell yourself you have to do it, like, do it respectfully. Give it to a real institution that's going to take care of it as well.
Right.
Don't.
I think that's one of the best ways to kind of honor the dead in that regard.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's crazy.
It's great. It's great.
I didn't hear that, or I didn't find that in my research. So Hugh Evelyn White kills himself, unfortunately. The next person to go down is a man named Aaron Ember, who is an American Egyptologist. He was a close personal friend of Carnarvon, also worked to excavate the tomb, also went into the tomb, and one day...
I feel like they have one more thing in common.
Damn it, Jason. One day, his home burned down. Still no real cause found in the investigation that followed. He would have had ample time to escape the flames, but he was obsessed with a book he had been working on. The house burned down. His wife ran to save their child, and she actually directed him. She told him to go get the manuscript. He's trying to find it. The fire kills his wife and child, devours the manuscript. He somehow makes it out just in time, passes out due to smoke inhalation and extreme burns, and is taken to a hospital. He regains consciousness. They tell him what happens.
He's lost everything.
Yeah, and his body essentially gives up. In theory, it was treatable, but what's he got to live for?
Yeah, he was broken.
Yeah. Now the manuscript, the book that he was working on, was a translation of the Egyptian Book of the Dead.
That's also
a little weird.
Super cool.
That's a little weird.
Super cool.
It is super cool, but it's just strange. Another visitor was Sir Lee Stack, who was the governor of Sudan. He had been one of the earliest visitors to the tomb as well, and then later, still within that same year actually, this one takes us back to 1922, he was assassinated on the streets of Cairo. And from there, we have in March 1926, this is another one of the famous victims. This fella's name is George Aaron Benedict. He was the curator of the Louvre Museum. By all accounts, he opened the day. He started the day totally happy and healthy.
What do we know about the Louvre Museum? I'm assuming it's French.
What? The
Museum.
Louvre? That's
Yeah.
where the Mona Lisa is. You're an art major.
I know about the Mona Lisa. I just didn't know about the museum it's currently kept in.
It's the Louvre, Jason.
Right. My bad. So apparently, to everyone else that doesn't know,
No one else doesn't know. If you don't know, write us a letter so that Jason can feel better.
yeah. All right. Now that you've made fun of me, continue.
All right, you're right. I'll edit that out. That was mean.
No. You can keep it in. We have nothing to hide here.
We have a very happy family here. No secrets. So, okay. That's true. I do have a bit of a temper. Anyway, in March of 26, George Aaron Benedict, curator of the world-famous Louvre Museum, starts his day happy and healthy, going to check out the tomb, going to see, especially if there are any artifacts or anything like that he can take home to France for, display there. As soon as he's out of the tomb, he starts feeling sick, woozy, feverish, and then days later, he's dead. And then in 1929, the first man to actually enter the tomb after Carver, it was Carver and then his personal secretary, Richard Bethel. He was found dead in his bed at the Mayfair Bath Club, which was like an exclusive gathering place for the socially relevant and wealthy. Originally, people said he was smothered to death, but upon autopsy, there's really no evidence of foul play. It just seems that this entirely healthy man who had actually just passed a health inspection with a perfect bill of health months earlier, just died. Just gone out of nowhere. Months later, his father, a baron, Baron Westbury, threw himself from his 7th floor apartment home. The home as well was full of gifts, little treasures and artifacts that Bethel had sent him, and his suicide note read, "I really cannot stand any more horrors and hardly see what good I am doing here, or I am going to do here, so I am making my exit." And again, you have...
It's kind of well put.
It's very well put. It's a very... I mean, as far as suicide notes go, it's a good one.
It's very British.
It is very British. That's true. And you have, again, just that question. Was there actually something haunting him? Was there actually something causing him these horrors? I mean, that's what's so interesting about this case to me, is he doesn't say, I'm depressed. He doesn't say anything like that. He says these horrors. Any more horrors?
So you are kind of looking into that as more of a literal interpretation?
Yeah, more of a supernatural element.
Okay.
Like, could it be that he was having similar visions as to what
not
Gould had?
Not possibly the horrors of his son dying, the horrors of newspapers trying to contact him, the horrors of all the other deaths that are apparently associated with the curse as well.
It's possible.
I mean, there's two sides to every coin, right?
Right, there is. And there's no documentation of what he meant. He didn't write any more about it previously in journals or anything like that. So it could be the horrors of average everyday life. It could be the horrors of supernatural. It was probably both. I mean, at the very least, even if he's not having actual visions and all of this, he is still surrounded by ancient artifacts,
right, and
associated with a curse.
Yeah, totally fair. That, and I mean, when you start to believe in something, like you
have you ever
can
heard
totally
of
experience that?
Have you ever heard of pointing the bone?
No.
So
is that like spin the bottle?
No.
Oh.
Kind of, except a lot worse. We won't get too far. This is definitely a tangent, but I think it speaks to the power of belief. In Australian Aboriginal society, there is a entity, a real person known as the Kardashian Man, and the Kardashian Man is basically a executioner, because in their belief system, at least I don't know if it's still this way, in their belief system, no one dies of natural causes. People die as a result of curses and sicknesses and murder and illness and stuff like that are all...
So kind of like the Reaper getting them.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what happens is a person dies. Through their rites and rituals, they find out who killed him. Even if it's just a heart attack, even if he just was really sick, they find out who killed him. The Kardashian Man will hunt him all the way until the ends of the earth if he has to. And when he finally catches him, he does nothing more than takes a bone and points it at him. I know, it sounds absurd, but then he dies. Like, these people die, and so the bone, of course, has to be psychically charged and magically ordained and all of that. The modern interpretation and psychological understanding is that these victims of these Kardashian men understand that if the bone is pointed at you, you die. And that is what happens. Their body gives up and shuts down.
Psychologically, yeah, you're told that you're going to die. And if you believe it enough, that you will.
And I think that goes a long way, that sort of concept goes a long way in especially these suicides, but even maybe in the illnesses, the sicknesses. The curse itself. Yeah. It could just be this mythos that people just believe, the superstitious people. And that is possible. We're going to get a little bit into some things out of that realm in a minute, but let's finish cataloging. We're really just checking the boxes here, which is terrible.
His name, he's dead. His name, they're dead.
Now, the other thing about Baron Westbury is his funeral. He was given a proper English funeral. His hearse was traversing through the streets of London towards the crematorium where he was to be cremated. And on the way, his hearse, which was one car in a processional of dozens, struck and killed an 8-year-old boy named Joseph Greer. So,
man, that sucks.
It's just sad, man. It's really sad. In his own way, he has now become a cursed artifact. His body, in theory, was also cursed.
He has an aura of death now.
Exactly. Yeah. So another little bit of a weird one there, and just really sad. I mean, whenever you talk about kids dying, it hurts my heart to even think of. In 1928, there's another archaeologist who works on the tomb. His name is A.C. Mace, and he falls into a coma. The doctors examine him. Everybody's looking at him, and they say this is a classic case of arsenic poisoning, and yet they take his blood, they look at his body, and there's no arsenic. There's no poison of any kind. Mm-hmm. But he essentially just wastes away in the coma until he dies. And then they do an official autopsy. Still no explanation. Still nothing else. Now, the last official victim of the curse is Lord Carnarvon's other half-brother. He already lost one half-brother. But his other half-brother dies.
Well, they make a full brother, so I mean...
No. That's not how that works.
Oh, whoops.
His other half-brother dies in 1929. He died of malarial pneumonia, which is actually...
That sounds awful.
Truly terrible. Yeah, and it's actually one of the hypotheses of what actually killed Carnarvon himself beyond just blood poisoning and festering wounds. Because he did contract pneumonia.
Right.
He may have also contracted malaria, and I guess that makes malarial
Wombo
pneumonia.
Combo right there.
Yeah. So, like this is 1929. So within 7 years, you have like half a dozen or more unrelated people, but you also have Carnarvon and his 2 brothers and his personal secretary and just
and his 3-legged dog.
Can't forget the dog. That's just a
lot of coincidences.
Freaky.
It's a lot of stuff piling up.
All right. Well, coincidences. So I'm glad you said coincidences.
Well, I mean, it gets to a point where you've got a number of coincidences to where it becomes a pattern.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna do one last one.
Okay. What is the last death you've got for us?
That's not true, actually.
All right. What's the last 12 deaths you've got for us today?
There's one more. The next ones that we're gonna cover, which there's not too many, but I promise that we're gonna end this eventually. We mentioned it earlier. Carter himself. He, of course, vehemently denied the curse for all of his life. Now, he spent his whole life in opposition to it, and according to normal belief, normal accounts, he died peacefully in his home March 2nd, 1939. However, according to people who were actually there, that's not exactly what happened.
Okay.
Instead, he had a home in Kensington, London, which is where he passed away, and as opposed to peacefully just drifting off into the afterlife, he was fighting and screaming. And he said one of the last things that he ever saw was Anubis sitting on his chest, choking him and stealing the breath out of his lungs. I mentioned earlier about the magic brick found in front of Anubis, the statue of Anubis. On the actual statue itself, there was an inscription which was discovered and translated by Carter that said, "It is I who hinder the sand from choking this secret chamber. I am for the protection of the deceased."
All right. Yeah, that's weird.
If he, regardless of his public persona, regardless of the power of psychology and all of this, if he truly did see Anubis at his last moment, that means he believed in the curse all along, even if it's all just psychological. Why would he see that if he truly believed it was all hubbub and silliness and fancy?
Well, maybe he again had a little doubt that the curse was fake. That a little doubt that he had doubts in the fact that the curse was not real. He believed slightly, just a teeny tiny, just a little bit.
Just believe a little.
He believed a little, maybe, and might have done it. I also think it's kind of weird that, I mean, yes, pharaohs were sought as living gods. I also think it's weird that Anubis would just be King Tut's personal executioner.
He wasn't King Tut's executioner. He was the guardian of all deceased, and especially the pharaohs.
But I mean, him and Tut go way back, apparently.
They do go way back. We're not done yet.
Oh, man, come on.
I know.
How many more deaths are we going to go over?
Like 4, I think.
4 more?
4 more.
All right, rapid fire, go.
The reason that we're doing these are because these ones are outside the realm of coincidence for me personally. There was actually a study done that states that statistically the number of people who died between 1922 and 1929 on the excavation team is in no way higher than chance. Like, you let 7 years pass, you take a group of 90 people, 9 of them are going to die. That's totally a normal thing that happens according to this statistic. To me,
have 9 people out, like, what?
Right?
Has 1 out of 9 people in my graduating class
that's
died
exactly
now?
what I thought too. I mean, they may have, but
no, dude, I follow them on Facebook. Right? They're alive.
So for me, even right off the bat, that's flawed. And then, but also our logic is flawed. You know, we graduated with 18-year-olds who are healthy, vital people and all this.
Right. Not in 1920s either.
Yeah, exactly. However, to me, that's still just...
It's a lot of people.
That's still... And it's a lot of people, and it's the way they died, and it's the fact that they were, for the most part, really apart from Carnarvon, they were all healthy people who succumbed within days or weeks. Like, just mysteriously quick illnesses. But even then, you know, the other popular theory is one, you kind of mentioned it, the bacteria. However, there are other stories that to me mean that it's just beyond that possibility of coincidence. The most famous one is that of Sir Bruce Ingham. He received a gift from Carter. And if we've learned anything in this episode, if you're going to take
don't get anything from Carter.
Don't take a gift from Carter. That's the primary thing I want you all to walk away with. He receives a gift from Carter, which is the severed hand of an unidentified mummy to be used as a paperweight. Isn't that fun? Isn't that a nice little gesture?
What the heck?
I know.
Who
These
does
people
that?
Are wrecked. They're messed up. But around this hand, there's a scarab bracelet with an inscription. Now, there's 2 different readings of the inscription, one of which is just bizarre. And if I have to choose between the 2, I'm going to say it's not this first one, which reads, because if it is, then really, Carter, you're a
That's
monster.
Not a gift. That's not a gift. That's something else.
But let me just say this. The first one is, cursed be he who moves my body, I'm sure, and severs my hand and uses it as a trinket.
The poor post boy that brought it to him.
If that is true, then Carter...
That is just blatantly...
Carter's terrible.
Yeah.
Why would you... Oh, here you go.
Here's a joke.
No such thing as curses. Well, all right then. But the other one that I think is more likely for it to say, still not great to receive as a gift, but it's not as weirdly specific before the fact.
Like right perfect.
Yeah. Is cursed be him who moves my body, to him shall come fire, water, and pestilence, which is pretty archetypal of an ancient Egyptian curse. You have the saying of not to do it and then the threat of what's going to happen. But he got it anyway. Carter gave it to him anyway. And shortly after receiving the gift and using it as a paperweight, Ingham's house burned to the ground. During the rebuilding of his house, the entire area flooded. So, fire, water, don't know about the pestilence. There may have been something else. But that's a little weird.
It's a little weird.
It's a little strange.
I will agree. It's a little weird.
Now, this next one...
Is that area prone to flooding?
Nope.
Not
as far as I could tell.
Okay.
Not as far as I could tell. This next one is the reason that I believe in this curse. Like, literally, even through all the other research, I had the same viewpoint as you, where it's probably just mold, it's probably just psychological trauma. However, this one comes to us from 1966, 44 years after the tomb was opened. It's the story of Muhammad Ibrahim, who was Egypt's director of antiquities, and he was under an enormous amount of pressure from the government to release a collection of archives or a collection of artifacts from the tomb to be displayed in Paris that year. Muhammad simply refused to do it for a period of time. And he was coming up with all these excuses. Well, they could break. They could get lost. The French may never return them. This and that and this and that. Finally, he gets pulled in by his superiors, and they say, what the heck, man? Just sign the contract, release it over. You have to do this or you're going to lose your job. And finally, he admits that for months, he had been having nightmares. Terrible dreams of a grisly death that awaited him should he release the artifacts. He begged for them to cancel the contract with the French and just let the artifacts be, but this was obviously dismissed. I mean, even then, from 1922 to 1966, the superstition of the world went way down, and they're saying, no, that's ridiculous. You're being ridiculous. We're not going to cancel this contract. This is going to be good for us financially. It's going to be good for us culturally. Just sign the damn piece of paper. And that's what he does. He signs the paper, and 5 minutes later, he's dead. He walks out of the building. Clear day. According to witnesses, no vehicles, no sounds of vehicles. Clear, beautiful day, streets are clear. He's walking across the street, and a vehicle just comes out of nowhere. It hits him, drives off, and cannot be found.
Yeah, that's a crazy coincidence. Absolutely nutso. Why didn't he just retire?
Well, that's fair. He liked his job.
I mean, I get if he liked his job, but I would have just rather been fired than if I believed that the curse would fulfill itself. If I did sign what, I would just be like, all right, fine, I'm out of here.
Well, I'm sure that he probably got talked into believing that he was being irrational and just finally let it go. But you're gonna say coincidence on a car coming out of nowhere, going to nowhere, killing a man who had been having dreams for months that if he did this thing that he had done 5 minutes before, he would die, and then he died. That's not a coincidence. I'm saying it. It's not a coincidence.
It's a great story.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It is. It's crazy. I agree with that.
All right. Okay, another curse story. Another real life curses.
Okay. All right.
This one is of Richard Adamson. He, in 1969, was the last surviving member of the original excavation. He loved to talk about the excavation, and he also he didn't do it very often, but he sometimes talked about the curse. And if he was just talking about the curse, like this is what people believed, everything was fine. But there are 3 instances where he spoke out against the curse. The first time, his wife died within 24 hours. He was giving an interview. Interview gets published. 24 hours later, his wife is dead. The next time, just a few years later, he gives another interview. Similar subject matter. There is no curse. This time, his son is on a plane. The plane crashes, and his son breaks his back. The last time that he ever talks about the curse, he's being interviewed on a British television program, and as far as I can tell, the hosts were just kind of goading him into it, saying, well, what about the curse? What about the curse? What about the curse? And he flies into a rage, and he says, there is no curse. He goes immediately. He doesn't even wait for the interview to end. He storms off, immediately goes into a cab, and then minutes later is in an accident where he is thrown from the cab in front of a truck that's coming, and the truck just barely misses his head. He's lying in bed at the hospital, and he says, until now, I refuse to accept that my family's misfortune had anything to do with the curse, but now I am not so sure. Anything there? Any sort of response there?
I find it weird that your 2 most compelling incidences of the curse happened to people that didn't actually dig it up.
No, he did. Adamson was the last surviving member of the original excavation.
Oh, dang, he's just 1969. Old.
Yeah, he's just old.
Okay.
But he did.
No. I mean, Carnarvon's daughter arguably if you believe the stories that were told, the first person that actually entered the chambers, she lived well into her 70s, I think.
Right. So,
and then on her deathbed, she was like, "There is no curse."
Right. So, and we'll talk. I have a theory.
And kind of just gave it the middle finger.
Right.
Is what it sounds like. She's a cool lady.
I have a theory, and we'll get into it in a minute, because we're practically done. There's one more apocryphal, one that really doesn't have any evidence, any reporting, but apparently there was a man who was on a plane with the cargo, and he accidentally kicked one of the boxes, and it was the box containing King Tut's death mask, and he said something to the effect of, "I have just kicked the most valuable artifact in the world. Ha 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 ha. Look at me. I'm fine." Getting off the plane, he breaks his leg. The leg that he used to kick it. So the other thing I want you to take away from this is, even if you don't believe in curses, just don't.
Don't
just
screw with it.
Don't.
Don't.
Just don't. And
I don't want to play with a Ouija board.
Yeah, seriously.
Not going to mess with that mojo.
Seriously. And so, to the same sort of effect, this is actually a documented one. We'll end on this story. I know we've talked a lot. I know we've told a lot of stories. There are a lot more. Like, we're maybe doing like 50% of what I found in the research. But we're going to end on this one. We're already going long. Now, the successor, do you remember Dr. Ibrahim?
Yes.
Okay. His successor was a man named Gamal Mahrez.
Okay.
He was a vocal opponent of the curse. Not even just, there is no curse. He would be like, if you believe in a curse, you're an idiot. You're stupid. Curses are dumb. It's like, why?
All right, what happened to him?
But it's 1972. He is loading artifacts, King Tut's artifacts, onto a plane headed for England for display.
Yeah.
As he's loading, perfectly healthy dude, nothing wrong with him, dies of a brain hemorrhage, drops dead. He had been just no health problems before this. However, he was quoted as saying that all deaths linked to the curse were purely coincidental. So in a way that's almost too unbelievable to be true, but it is. I double-checked this crap, man. There's another man on the flight. His name is Ken Parkinson. And it seems to me that the curse just really wanted everyone to know that this isn't coincidental. Ken Parkinson was a flight engineer. He'd been on the plane in 1972. On that day, literally 365 days later, to the minute, he has a heart attack. Doesn't kill him. 365 days after that, to the minute, he has a heart attack. Doesn't kill him. He has a heart attack every day at the exact same minute that Dr. Gamal Merez dies for 6 years, until finally it kills him in 1978. That's just a little bit too much for me, man.
How old was that dude?
Well, he would have been military age. So these people, he was probably young to middle-aged. I wasn't able to find his exact age.
Okay.
But because these people, they weren't just a private air group.
Uh-huh.
They were members of
Their
the
government.
Royal... Yeah, they were members of the Royal Air Force. So they would have been in good health, and they would have had regular inspections with physicians to make sure they were in good health.
Okay.
So how does
That's
fungus
crazy.
do that? How does fungus do that?
Okay. Okay, you want to talk about that? I'll love to talk about that. Fungus, mold, bacteria, it's a really big thing now to watch out for as an archaeologist. I mean, to the extent that when we are still doing autopsies on King Tut's body, the scientists that are doing it are essentially in hazmat gear. Now, when Carter originally opened up the sarcophagus and revealed King Tut, within the wrappings of King Tut's
linen,
thank you, there were essentially like brooch size treasures, warding off evil and whatnot, and
amulets.
Essentially protecting King Tut. Now, unfortunately, he decided to take the easy way to get at most of those, and did a rather crude chopping up of King Tut's body. That's why King Tut currently is decapitated.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I mean, you got to think about it. You are actively flinging up bacteria, mold, funguses into the air.
Totally.
As you just smile at me like this is
So,
no big deal. And there was a woman actually fairly recently that visited the tomb and died because of the mold.
Yeah.
Because she had a weakened immune system. So it's tough to just completely say that it's not mold, it's not bacteria, it's not microorganisms that are leading to the eventual disaster and doom of these people.
Right.
Especially because they didn't have the technology to really know that back then.
Right.
So what else do you blame it on?
A curse.
But a curse. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, you're smiling. Go ahead, retort.
So, but then how does mold 50 years later, how does mold cause a heart attack the same time every year? How does mold cause a car to come around the corner, hit this guy, and disappear? Like, that's what I'm saying. All of those deaths, all through the research, like the first 3 or 4 days of research, I was totally on board.
Yeah, all the immediate deaths
same way.
Are, I would say, are caused by that, excavating the tomb.
How does mold crash a plane?
So, okay, yeah, if we look at the broader spectrum and the more recent occurrences that happened in the mid 1800s or 1900s, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The curse is a scapegoat. I'm saying it.
Right.
It makes it seem like the curse is the easy way to explain it. And we want to explain it like that.
Right.
I want to explain it like that.
Right.
I'm all about the mumbo jumbo.
It's not, for me, it's not confirmation bias. It's not that I have this idea. I know that's probably how it seemed this whole show, that I have this idea, and then from there have decided that everything, like I
everything
said,
is linked. It's all connected.
I believed this idea. Before, the reason that we were going to do this as a Jason special, kind of the same thing with the Chupacabra, is because I didn't believe in it at all. But then with Amon,
and now he believes in the Chupacabra and King Tut's curse.
Chupacabra's still out. Don't hold my hand. Don't.
Okay.
All right. But
just believe a little.
I figured, okay, you know what? We just had a Jason special, so we might as well make it a full episode. We might as well go ahead and do it now because of Amon Ket and all of that. We wanted to we've been planning since we started the podcast to do an Egyptian-themed legend, basically, this week. And so I started researching. And again, first few days.
King Tut's curse is the most notable of modern
most
time.
Prominent. First few days, mold, fever, mental instability, normal stuff. Totally normal stuff. And then just 2 or 3 days ago is when I found this stuff that was at the end of the notes, or at the end of the episode here. And from then, I believe in curses. And let me talk about that for a second.
Okay.
So, I would even be willing to say that the people like Carnarvon did not die of a curse. People like Gould did not die of a curse. Sure, he saw Anubis. It's just purely psychological. All admit to that. But what I can't admit to is especially these few people, and then even then others as well. Other people who still died, especially like Aaron Ember, or was it Aaron Ember? Dr. Ember, whose house burned down. And Bruce Ingham, whose house burned down and then was flooded, just like it said it was going to be. So the question for me is not, is it a curse or not? Because it's definitely a curse.
Well, I think obviously too with pop culture, I kind of told Egyptian curses. Those are the ones you got to watch out for.
Egyptian curses and Native American curses. All other curses,
both of those. Both of those
don't have to worry about, but those two
are legitimate.
Right. Well, and that Native American curses is mainly because of poltergeist. But in any case, so the question for me isn't, is it a curse? Because regardless of how many of these could have just been natural causes, I think that there's definitely some mojo, some heebie-jeebies going on. So I would like to, I'm not saying I completely believe this theory, but I'd like to put forward a piece of Egyptian mythology that might explain where we're going and how we're getting there, as far as why the people who died.
All right, I'll bite.
So, in Egyptian mythology, you have the god Anubis. Like I said, he acts as a psychopomp. He transports souls from the realm of the living into the realm of the dead. And the very first place he takes you is a meeting with Osiris, the king of the dead, or the god of the dead.
Is that where they weigh their heart?
That's where they weigh the heart, and that's where we are. So Osiris has a set of scales.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand,
has to be lighter than a feather.
On one side, there's a feather. On the other side, you put your heart. If your heart is lighter than a feather, stick around to the end of the show, okay? Because we'll go a little more into it in a fashion. But if your heart is lighter than a feather, you essentially are resurrected in a way. You don't have your material body, but you have a full and complete happy spiritual afterlife. If your heart is heavier than the feather, you're fed to a crocodile-headed lion, and you are annihilated. You do not exist in any fashion. Could it be that the people who were affected by the curse are, and you said it yourself at the beginning of the show, these people did not take these things seriously, especially Carter. Of all people, he's sending people severed hands with very specific warnings about curses on them. Could it be that the people who died from the curse died because
their hearts were heavier than feathers?
Their hearts were heavier, not in any literal way, but because in their core being, besides anything put out to the world or anything like that, they knew that they were disrespecting this pharaoh. You've got to think as well that a lot of the people who didn't die are the local workers, the Egyptians in the tomb, because they believed in what was going on, and they took the precautions to make sure that they were doing, like, they were just following orders, but they were also doing
spiritually what they could,
as much as they could.
Yeah.
So again, not a for sure thing,
right?
But
I mean, nothing that we were talking about now is a for sure thing, but it's a decent theory.
But you've got to wonder if the curse is if there is a curse. It's supernatural. It's outside the realm of normal reality. And who's to say that whatever entity, if the curse is an entity within itself, or if it's being controlled by, this entity of Anubis or Osiris or whatever. I don't want to go too far in the weeds here. Who's to say that those people can't, or entities can't see these people for what they truly are, which in Carnarvon's case, Carter's case, Gould's case, a lot of these cases are money-hungry people who have no problem cutting the head off of a pharaoh and ripping open his possessions. And that takes it back to the original question, why was King Tut's tomb so well intact? And I think it's because there were those first, months after he died, people tunneled in, people broke the seals, something bad happened to those people, and then people left it alone. As opposed to potentially other times, other curses, quote unquote, in ancient Egypt where people robbed graves and nothing happened. So that's my side of it. I'm back, baby.
Okay.
Hi, Brazil. I thought was all just scientific phenomenon, but this, I am sold out for curses. I feel good.
So then why wasn't Carnarvon's daughter on the hit list?
Because she may have, and that's the thing about that theory, is that it looks at the soul of a person. You don't have to believe in the curse for it not to get you. You just have to have pure motivations. Who's to say that she didn't actually, if she cared at all, she may have not even cared. She may have been like, oh, my dad did this. Okay, whatever. But who's to say that she didn't have a respect for this place and this person that her father and everyone else didn't have?
So why did the guy essentially in charge of King Tut's artifacts get offed as soon as he signed the waiver for it to...
Because he was given a clear message.
Okay.
And he chose, at the end of the day, you said it yourself, why didn't he just retire? And he didn't, because in that way, like, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but in this theory, in that way, his heart was not pure. He said, I care more about my life and my existence
Position. Okay.
than the life of this ancient ancient guy who's been dead for 3,200 years who really cares at the end.
The one
of
thing
the
I
day.
don't really get about that is why would a pharaoh that was struck from the record book and forgotten for such a long time, why is he upset with the world getting to know him?
Again, not necessarily the world getting to know him, but the world disrespecting him, you know.
Which I completely understand the 20s. But, I mean, if you or I went to a King Tut exhibit, or we're trying to facilitate that with the Egyptian government,
Right.
and we're very hands-on in the experience, would you assume that we'd get offed?
No, not necessarily unless we breathed in mold. Like
Of course,
I said,
yeah.
Like I said, it's a hybrid thing there. There are going to be some of these, and I'm not going to pick them out from the so-called natural deaths or whatever. Some of them probably died of the curse. Some of them probably just died of mold. You know, at the end of the day, mold's a powerful thing in its own way. But you got to take if we were doing this, which one day we will,
Okay.
we're going to go to Egypt. We're going to go in that tomb. We're going to wear hazmat suits. I really think so much of their mythology and really the way they lived their lives regarded this final judgment. And I really think that is going to play some sort of role in this.
Okay.
One way or the other.
The judgment, the weighing.
Mm-hmm.
The weighing of souls and hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. All right, well.
There it is.
That was cool.
There it is. That's...
So...
Anything else?
How would you prefer to be buried? What's your ideal funeral?
What I'm going to do, I'm going to be buried ideally in like my backyard, and I am going to have a tree sapling planted on top of me so that it will grow down, its roots will grow through my body, take the nutrients from my body, and use it to grow the tree. That's what I'm going to do.
Aw.
What are you going to do?
So, like, mausoleums are cool and stuff, but
yeah.
and that's kind of what I super wanted as a younger person. Now I think a Tibetan sky burial would be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would just be...
You want to take the listeners through that?
A Tibetan sky burial
is brutal.
It's intense. So essentially what occurs is after your passing, you're brought onto a spiritual mountaintop, and your body is left there for birds to eventually come and scavenge it and carry your body to the winds.
We say spiritual mountaintop. It is also a literal mountain.
Yeah, yes. You are placed on the top of a mountain and essentially fed to birds.
Yeah, dude.
But I can't think of a more beautiful place for my body to leave existence.
Other option for me.
Freeze
also,
it.
that's so hardcore metal. That's beautiful. Other option for me, I do get cremated. Or maybe I do the tree thing, but I have them cremate my hand. And then Katie goes to Disneyland, and she goes in the Haunted Mansion, and she pours my ashes out in the Haunted Mansion. And then I just my hand just gets to haunt people there. Wouldn't that be cool? Right? That's actually a big problem. Like, people do that all the time.
Really?
Yeah. They are constantly on the lookout for people trying to scatter ashes in the Haunted Mansion. So maybe wear one of those little masks the next time you go through.
Yeah, because, you don't want to suck in dead body,
No,
do you?
you don't. Anyway, that's Tutankhamun. We did it. Show's over.
You know what's really Tutankhamun?
What?
Death. Lots of death.
So hardcore.
Tutankhamun for you.
Tutankhamun for you. Tutankhamun's coming for me. That's for sure. I really am. I loved researching this because I love Egyptian myth. I always have. I have this huge book in the other room, the Encyclopedia of Ancient Egypt, that my parents gave me when I was 12, and I just adore that. But I am happy to be able to move on with my life and not have to worry about curses all the time. That'll be nice. Except if you...
to your dreams now.
Well, if you were listening if you made it all the way to the end of Hi Brazil last week, you'll know that this week, or right after this, next week, we're going to be covering Whitley Strieber's Communion, which is one of the most well-known, well-documented cases of alien abduction in the history of the world. So, Tutankhamun might not be haunting my dreams, but that
aliens
will.
might?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they already
Okay,
are.
well,
Let's be honest.
Fair enough.
So, cool. We'll just go ahead. We'll wrap up here. I made a deal with you people.
Why do you call them you people?
I don't know.
It's like you don't like them or something.
I do like them. I made a deal that we would read reviews on the show. Now, we didn't get any reviews this week, which hurts my heart. It hurts Jason's heart. But we understand.
I don't
People,
have a heart, man.
That's fair.
People, I want to pass the scales, just not have one.
Dear Lord.
Boom.
People are busy. We're not mad at you. We still love you. However, if you do want to go into the iTunes store, into the Apple Podcasts app, and leave us a review, we would love that, and we will still read it out on the show next week. I'd like to highlight another show that I actually just discovered this week that I think our listeners are really gonna dig if they take a crack at it.
All these puns.
I'm not trying to. You're making them puns.
It's all excavation puns.
This is the way I talk. And that is actually a show called Pleasing Terrors, and it's put on by a fellow named Mike Brown. He does an amazing job. It's essentially a kind of like our show, a paranormal history show, except he does it alone, and he does it even as more of like a coherent story rather than just me and Jason rambling. It's got amazing production, amazing sound quality, amazing sound design. I listened. They actually have an episode. Their newest episode, as of when we're recording this, is actually on the Pine Barrens. So that's nice, like little supplemental for anybody who enjoyed our series. He also has one on the origin of Frankenstein. So it's really good stuff. If you're looking for something to hold you over,
fictional character.
Well, listen to it. It's seriously amazing. I'm not going to give anything away. It's his second newest episode. But take a listen. It's seriously great stuff. Yeah, and then our last thing, we need to have a discussion.
Okay.
Us and the listeners. So we mentioned 2 or 3 times during the show, stick around for a special announcement. So we have decided, this is our 10th episode. We've been doing this for 2.5 months. And we've decided that we are actually going to go ahead, and as of right now, we have a Patreon page set up. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Patreon, it's essentially a way for you to sponsor the podcast and get something else out of it. So basically what we've done, it's a monthly subscription, and we've set up different reward tiers. The first one is just $1 a month. If you give us just $1 a month, you're going to get a shout out on the show. We'll do it after the outro, any episode that we have a new sponsor during the week. But you're also going to get a little, sometimes it'll be 5 minutes, sometimes it'll be 20 minutes, but basically a little debrief session at the end where me and Jason just kind of keep talking.
Shoot the breeze.
Shoot the breeze about what we learned and just about the podcast in general. So that's for $1 a month. You're going to get at least, at the very least, 20 minutes, but probably closer to an hour of content every month.
If you really want to listen to us a bit more. If you
really want to. And that's how that's what all of this hinges on, is that you like us and we like you, and you want to hear us talk more. And if that's not the case, I don't blame you. Okay.
To be honest, the best stuff is what you edit out.
That's true. Which, damn it, you're messing up the segues.
Oh,
all right.
My bad.
So we're going to get back to that. So the second level is $3 a month. And for that, you're going to get 2 patron-only shows. I went ahead. This is the special part where we talk about Akhenaten. I actually went through earlier this week and I recorded a 45-minute long solo episode. You
didn't tell me about it either.
I did tell you about it.
You told me after the fact.
Okay. Well, it's too hard to try to we'll figure it out. But anyway, it's 45 minutes talking about not only Akhenaten, but especially going into his heresy, especially going into that shift from polytheism to monotheism. It also touches on alien origins. It also touches on a deeper discussion on Egyptian mythology. And that's kind of the idea with the bonus episodes, is that they're just going to be twice a month, 45 to an hour, and we're going to talk about, we're either going to go more in depth historically on what we were talking about, or we're going to go off the deep end and just talk about the craziest stuff, the craziest theories associated with whatever we're talking about, things that may have not made this show or that we discussed briefly and then go more deep into. And then the last tier, at $5 a month, you're going to get all that And, kind of like Jason mentioned earlier, I do a substantial amount of editing. I don't know what this show is going to come out to. We're currently at 2 hours and 5 minutes.
I mess up a lot.
Well, it's not even... First off, that's not true. You're very good at your job. But it's not even just messing up, because we're going so long these days where we just simply have to edit out not anything crucial, but some of the more flavor information. And then on top of that, you just get to hear us make stupid jokes. And like, for instance, on the Hy Brazil episode, there was one point where...
Don't.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not even going to mention it.
Sponsor us and find out.
You're going to be really disappointed. But so you'll get that every episode. We're just going to take a raw file of the episode. I'm going to clean it up for sound and stuff a little bit. But other than that, it's going to be unedited. It's going to be uncut. It's going
to be the real deal.
It is going to be the real deal. We're not saying that it's like the extended edition of The Lord of the Rings, because it's not. But it is more stories and just more of us. So if any of that interests you, just go to patreon.com/notalonepodcast. Take a look. I've got it all written out there, what you get and all of that. And if I can do this right, the first 3 rewards will be up by the time you hear this. We'll have just our little debrief at the end. We'll have the Akhenaten episode, and we'll have the raw file of this show all uploaded to Patreon by the time you're hearing this, if I can figure out how it works. So, all right. Cool.
I guess that's a wrap for the day.
Oh, Lord. That was a pun. I caught that one. So, who did it last week? Did you do it last week?
I feel like you did it last week.
No, because I remember you said...
Did I?
The thing about the dog cooking.
Oh, yeah.
The meal from the dog. Okay, so let me do this. All right.
Hit me.
So, until next time, remember, whether you find yourself in a dimly lit tomb full of toxic mold and ancient magic, or on your deathbed and that jackal-headed god Anubis sits on your chest and steals the very breath from your lungs, we are not alone.